am Alpha Boss's most useful beta assistant. I can handle work and take care of life. I can also hold down my boss during his heat and inject him with an alpha suppressant. I'm calm and capable, practically a must-have tool for BL novels. But at the end of the year, I submitted my resignation. He signed it without a second glance. On New Year's Eve, he frantically pounded on my door. The moment I opened it, the alpha pounced, sinking his teeth into my nape. "Assistant Lin? I knew I'd have to mark you to keep you from running off." 1. Even without smelling the explosive pheromones, I could tell what kind of intense battle was taking place inside the room. The Omega whimpered, feigning resistance. Ethan was reaching his limit, eyes bloodshot, veins bulging. His lust-filled gaze flickered with confusion when he saw me. I swiftly grabbed Ethan's hair, slamming his head against the wall. I jammed my knee between his legs, immobilizing him. One hand pinned his shoulder, the other swiftly injecting the suppressant. The drug took effect quickly. Ethan groaned, passing out in my arms. He slumped heavily against me. With the alpha taken care of, there was still the trembling Omega. Saying, "Sorry to intrude," I advanced on the Omega. He was helpless, and I easily injected the suppressant into him. The car I called took Ethan away. I stayed by the Omega's bed until he woke up. "You were not harmed in any way while unconscious. Here's video proof." I handed him a phone and a printed contract. "Also, please read this carefully. I hope we can reach an agreement." I transferred money to the Omega, charging it to Ethan. 2. This wasn't the first time I'd cleaned up a mess like this for him. In the 5 years I'd been Ethan's assistant, I'd used a combination of threats and incentives to get countless people to sign confidentiality agreements. He was young, handsome, and rich, and people said his pheromones had a rare, cool fragrance. He naturally exuded a magic that attracted Omegas in heat. Even some ambitious betas wanted to get into his bed. Ethan was like a huge tang monk meat bun, and everyone wanted a bite. My first encounter with Ethan was when an Omega dragged him into heat on the street. Back then, no one but me dared to stop a crazed alpha. I borrowed a suppressant from an alpha nearby and snuck up behind him, pinning him down. Ethan's open mouth was meant to bite the Omega's gland, but he ended up sinking his teeth into my arm. I winced and punched him unconscious before injecting the suppressant. The junior I saved wasn't very grateful. The Omega slapped me, both ashamed and angry. "Why did you have to interfere?" After this incident, Ethan hired me, a recent graduate of automation, as his assistant with a high salary. I knew nothing about office work, but I was a strong and capable beta. Ethan was very satisfied with that. Time passed, and I'd been with him for 5 years. Now I could handle all kinds of assistant work perfectly. I was also his bodyguard and caretaker. I took good care of him in both work and life. Meticulous, never making mistakes. I couldn't help but wonder, what would he do without me? But I wanted to quit. 3. Ethan's parents were anxious about his marriage. They'd arranged several blind dates for him before the new year. Ethan even wanted me to handle this. He had someone concoct perfumes from the pheromones of the Omegas and made me smell them one by one. Whichever one I liked, he'd go see. I really thought he was crazy. I didn't dislike those pleasant scents. But the thought of where they came from made me sick. Even so, I completed my work expressionlessly and forcibly chose one with a cool scent. Ethan asked me, "You like the scent?" I commented, "It's a very clean scent." He smiled. "I like it too." Ethan even booked a separate table next to his for me during the dates, as part of the play. At first, I didn't agree to do such an awkward thing. Firstly, out of consideration for the dates. Secondly, it wouldn't be easy to explain to Ethan's parents. But Ethan said, "I've got your back. What are you afraid of?" He'd always say that whenever he forced me to do something outrageous. And I'd always give in. 4. A beautiful female Omega, with a rebellious glint in her eyes. Sitting there, she and Ethan seemed like two alphas fighting with their eyes. She cut to the chase, "I don't like big alpha energy, and my kinks aren't mainstream. I have to be dominant in intimate relationships. Can you handle that?" Ethan, with a bruise on his head, was just as decisive, "I can't." "Heh, then it's simple." The Omega chuckled. "I won't eat with you. I have to go home to my wife." Before leaving, she patted Ethan's shoulder, "A beta-alpha relationship, just as brave as me. Good luck." I seemed calm on the surface, but I was freaking out inside. They mistook Ethan and me for a couple. They really dared to imagine. Whether we liked it or not, some rumors had already spread. Ethan, known as a walking pheromone bomb with the sex appeal of an incubus, had been single until now, with a relationship history as clean as a blank slate. It just didn't seem normal. As the person closest to Ethan's life, I was the first to get shot. They speculated that I wasn't just Ethan's assistant but actually his secret beta boyfriend. Because the Chin family was too traditional and only accepted mainstream alpha-omega relationships, we hadn't gone public. The rumors were half true. It was true that Ethan's parents didn't really accept betas. When Ethan went on another date with an Omega who already had a partner, and I suspected that there was something wrong with my nose as I kept sniffing out married women. His parents finally couldn't sit still. We're not old-fashioned, but we really can't accept unconventional preferences. I saw their difficulty. I obediently said what they wanted to hear. I understand. I'll be leaving Mr. Chin's side soon. I'll resign in a few days. Only then did his parents show a genuine smile. Ethan came back from the restroom and naturally sat next to me. He put a piece of fish in my bowl and said, "It doesn't taste as good as yours." 5. At the end of the year, the flu was raging. I was unlucky enough to catch it. Today was a special day, so I had to go to work even with a high fever and a mask. Ethan was particularly focused at work today, staring at the computer the whole time, completely oblivious to my condition. I put the resignation letter in front of him. He signed it without looking. I asked him, with a nasal voice, "Aren't you going to look at what you just signed?" "No need," Ethan said. "I trust any contract that goes through your hands." Total trust. I was speechless and couldn't help but feel a little sad. My grip tightened on the resignation letter, and I actually had some inappropriate thoughts. Should I stay? Staying by his side wouldn't be bad. The salary was good, just that the boss was a handful. Suddenly, some bad memories flashed in my mind. The sound of tearing fabric, painful bites, salty tears and fluids. And those eyes, manipulated by lust. They completely dispelled my thoughts of staying. "Assistant Lin, are you going home for New Year's this year? If not, do you want to come to my house for the holiday?" 6. Last year I didn't go home, and neither did Ethan. I was his personal nanny for over a week, cooking 3 meals a day and coaxing him to take his medicine during his rut. One day he secretly spat out his medicine and snuck into my room while I was asleep. I fought back desperately, biting his shoulder until it was covered in teeth marks. The next morning, Ethan had forgotten everything. He asked me if a thief had broken into the house and beat him up. In a fit of anger, I left him a resignation letter and disappeared for 3 months. He used every means to find me, every means to get me back. He even resorted to playing the victim, saying to me, "My life without you has become terrible." I softened and returned to his side. After that, no matter how reluctant Ethan was, I would give him the most painful and effective manufactured suppressant every time he went into heat. I answered his question truthfully, "I'll probably go home this year." Ethan asked, "When will you be back?" I also answered truthfully, "I won't." Ethan smiled. "That's a first, our assistant Lin is making jokes. Come back to the company soon, and I'll take you on a company-paid trip, okay?" I didn't refuse or agree. My colleague in Human Resources was surprised to see me leaving. She looked through my file. "Assistant Lin, what will Mr. Chin do without you? Can he even manage on his own?" I shook my head, "Not my problem." The colleague asked carefully, "Assistant Lin, can I ask why you're resigning?" I was silent for a moment. "I've made enough money. And I never wanted to see Ethan's face again." 7. At work, I was the reliable assistant Lin. After resigning, I became Lin Jia, capable of lying in bed all day watching low IQ videos. My parents called to confirm that I'd bought my ticket home for the new year. Then, they steered the topic towards my alpha younger brother. Tianyao found someone, an Omega with a good family, who's coming home with him for the new year. We can't not prepare a gift for them, can we? As the alpha of a beta family, Lin Tianyao received all the love. After draining my parents, he came to drain me, his high-earning beta brother. I understood their meaning and transferred them some money. After getting the money, they started caring about me. When they heard I had the flu, there was a moment of silence on the other end of the phone, then a chilling voice. "Honey, maybe you should go home for the new year later? It wouldn't be good to spread the infection." After hanging up, I canceled my plane ticket. With that money, I could add 2 more dishes to my own New Year's Eve dinner. But on New Year's Eve, I not only didn't have dinner, but I was still running a high fever. I'd been to the hospital to get in a few days ago, and my condition was stable. But as soon as I stopped the antibiotics, the virus started fighting back. Firecrackers were going off everywhere outside. I turned the Spring Festival gala down to a whisper and curled up in bed, planning to sleep. The banging sound was disturbing my peace. I suddenly realized that it wasn't fireworks. Someone was knocking on the door. 8. The moment I opened the door, an alpha pounced, sinking his teeth into my nape. "Assistant Lin? I knew I'd have to mark you to keep you from running off." It was Ethan, whom I hadn't seen in days and whose contact information I'd blacklisted. "Resign? Blacklist?" Ethan gritted his teeth, nipping at my nape as punishment. "When are you going to stop leaving without a word? Can't you just tell me what's wrong?" He slipped his cold hands into my clothes, caressing my waist, making me gasp. "Why are you so hot? Are you in heat?" I was dizzy and speechless. Did he even remember that I was a beta? Where would he find a gland to mark? How could I go into heat? Let go. I wanted to push him away, but my weak strength and nasal voice only made it sound like I was playing hard to get. Ethan scooped me up in his arms. Only then did I realize that he wasn't right either. His hands were cold, but his embrace was hot. His breathing was heavier than usual. These were all signs of his heat. What are you doing? Marking you completely. I asked him tremulously. Who am I? Ethan threw me on the bed, looking down at me. Lin Jia, my disobedient assistant. My pupils constricted. This time, he was conscious. It wasn't just instinct. He pulled out his belt and lashed it across my exposed waist. Seeing me wince, Ethan wore a look of satisfaction. Then, he used the belt to tightly bind my wrists. I warned him with all my might, Ethan. You'll regret this. Oh? Ethan's voice was soft, but the words sent a chill down my spine. Based on what you're saying, how many times have I had to regret things before? 9. He knew. He knew everything. This shocking revelation drained all my strength to resist. Whether it was the high fever or the fear of the truth being exposed, I couldn't help but tremble. My body was so hot that Ethan's kisses felt cool. His voice was so cruel. Lin Jia, I don't know what you're holding on to. You've had countless opportunities to reject me, but you never have. Stop talking. I lightly bumped him with my knee, only to provoke Ethan to escalate things. His fingertips rubbed against my inner thigh. Still pretending? Pretending you don't care about my dates, pretending you have no feelings for me? Ethan chuckled. How could you forget those nights you personally opened the door for me? Nights of mingled fear and anticipation. Reducing myself to an object of desire, where love became an instrument to strip me of my sanity. I had the right to say no, to fight him tooth and nail. But I chose to accept, to tolerate everything about him. So now, the consequences of my indulgence had come. Tears slid down, leaving 2 trails of cooling dampness. I tried to catch my breath. Not today. I'm sick. You'll get infected too. 10. The emergency room on New Year's Eve wasn't much quieter than usual. Ethan helped me onto the hospital bed, carefully protecting the hand that was hooked up to and 4. I was so tired that I could barely keep my eyes open. But I still didn't forget to worry about him. You can't have caffeine or alcohol for 24 hours after taking a suppressant. Don't you dare. I know. Ethan bent down, tucking the blanket around me. He pulled up a chair and placed his palm on my forehead. Just sleep. Leave everything else to me. I couldn't ignore him sitting beside me. I gave into my sick body and drifted off to sleep. After a while, I asked him. Can you turn on the Spring Festival Gala? I want to hear some noise. Okay. Ethan took out his phone and played the gala for me. My right hand, receiving the 4, was ice cold. A warm hand covered it. My eyelashes fluttered, but I didn't open my eyes. As the New Year's countdown ended, fireworks exploded. Ethan whispered. Happy New Year. 11. I slept soundly that night. I even had a restless dream. I dreamed that Ethan looked at me with the same coldness he used to look at those chasing after him. Lin Jia, how could you even have such thoughts? To me, you're worthless. I woke up with a start. The 4 drip had been removed, and the chair was empty. It should be like this. I should have come to the emergency room alone and taken care of myself. Last night was just Ethan's momentary act of kindness. I closed my eyes. When I opened them again, I saw Ethan. You're awake. He came in quietly, I barely heard his footsteps. The electronic thermometer beeped. Ethan sighed in relief. The fever's finally gone. Do you want to use the restroom first? I bought some breakfast. Do you want to eat? I remained silent. Ethan touched my forehead with the back of his hand. Are you still feeling unwell? No. I grabbed his wrist and pushed his concern away. Then, I said something against my will. I just think you should leave. 12. My parents are honest betas. They always told me. Follow the established path and don't cause trouble. So, I voluntarily gave up my competition qualifications and focused on the college entrance exam. My alpha brother, on the other hand, could pursue his dreams at a sports academy. When I received the job offer from Ethan, they were both unsupportive. Saving an alpha on the street could get you a high-paying job? Impossible. He must be after you, my dad said definitively. Some rich people find omegas troublesome and go after betas instead. You should just graduate and become a blue-collar worker. Preferably at a state-owned enterprise. But they were also the ones who. My alpha brother complained that his family's financial situation wasn't good enough. His beta parents couldn't provide him with the material comforts he wanted. Other alpha classmates wore designer brands and traveled abroad from time to time. But what did he have? Nothing. At their request, I humbly begged Ethan to give me another chance. I would work myself to the bone. The first 2 days after getting hired, I went home for dinner. The betas who gave birth to me continued to teach me the survival rules of betas. Don't stand out, follow the rules, and listen to everything the alpha says. Understand your value to the boss. I guess my value to Ethan was a nanny who could cook well, a meticulous secretary. Most importantly, a walking alpha suppressant, preventing him from falling into unexpected desires and helping him maintain his purity for his future Omega wife. What if I fell in love with him? That would be embezzlement, disloyalty. 13. While Ethan was called home for dinner, I checked out of the hospital. I spent a fortune on a last-minute plane ticket. I wanted to hide from Ethan. I didn't know where to go, but the first place that came to mind was home. I was waiting at the airport when Ethan rushed over with a suitcase. He took off his gloves, revealing his well-defined fingers. He brushed back the soft black hair and touched my forehead. Why did you check out without telling me? I looked at him in confusion, not understanding why he was here. He continued to ask me. The plane's destination is River City. Are you going home? I opened my mouth. How did you know? Ethan said helplessly, you booked 2 tickets. I had gotten used to going out with him, and when I wasn't thinking clearly, I subconsciously booked tickets for both Ethan and me. I booked the wrong ticket. And you used my card. I'll transfer the money to you. Ethan sat down next to me. It's not about the money. The plane was delayed, turning it into a red-eye flight. I was sick and couldn't handle staying up all night. When I opened my eyes again, I was in Ethan's arms. He woke me up. It's time to board. An expensive coat was draped over me, with a faint, cool scent. The strange sense of security made me panic. Even when I arrived in River City, I still didn't understand what was going on. Ethan followed me back to my hometown because I booked the wrong ticket. And I was originally trying to hide from him. I searched for attractions in River City on my phone, but they were all closed. Ethan saw what I was doing. He grabbed my wrist with a strength I couldn't break free from. I'm going home with you. 14. As my boyfriend. I didn't know how to explain it to my family. Everyone, look, this is my boss. He's not going home for the new year, he's celebrating with us. Ethan bought a lot of gifts before entering the house, more than he could carry with both hands. I wanted to help him. But he scanned a QR code and bought a hand warmer, shoving it into my hand. You can hold this. So, I followed him with the warm hand warmer in my hand. Once inside, Ethan opened his suitcase. Inside were even more valuable gifts, worth at least tens of thousands of dollars. I don't know what your parents like, so I can only offer a small gift to show my sincerity. My house was already cramped, filled with the things Ethan had bought. Not only were my family's eyes wide, but the Omega dating my brother was even more interested in Ethan. The Omega glanced at Ethan shyly. Your brother's boyfriend is so rich. As soon as he said that, my parents' and brother's expressions changed. My brother is the luckiest beta I've ever seen. He aimed the gun at me. Even after having an abortion, he could find such a great alpha. I looked at my mother in disbelief. She was the only one who knew the secret. Her eyes darted away, unable to meet my gaze. Ethan put his arm around my waist, patting me to soothe my stiffness. Yes, it's my fault. I didn't use protection and got him pregnant when he shouldn't have been. 15. Ethan, with damp hair, pinned me against the wall. That familiar cool scent lingered in my nose. His gaze was oppressive, maxing out his alpha dominance. We need to talk about the pregnancy. As far as I know, I never entered there, so it's impossible for you to. His tone became colder for the last few words. To be pregnant with my child. So Ethan didn't know. I raised my head, looking directly at him. In your memory, when was the first time we had that kind of relationship? Ethan narrowed his eyes. The first time you left without a word, after you came back. I was too angry, and you didn't refuse. My memory of the first time was much earlier than his. At the beginning of the explicit film, I resisted halfway before gradually losing strength. What was that saying? Understand your duties and don't disobey the boss. My biggest duty was to act as Ethan's human suppressant. Do my best to soothe him during his heat, by any means necessary. When I stopped fighting him, Ethan completely lost his mind, and his suppressed desires were instantly ignited. 16. After it was over, I didn't think about leaving at first. While cleaning myself up, I savored the gentle, lingering kisses Ethan gave me amidst the storm. I tasted love, even though I didn't know what love was like. The porridge bubbled in the creamy white porcelain pot. The bacon was sizzling. Exhausted from his torment all night and distracted by my worries, I made a strange fusion breakfast. Ethan got dressed and got out of bed. Amidst my expectant and fearful gaze, Ethan made the first and most inappropriate joke of his life. Was there a thief in the house yesterday? Ethan rolled up his sleeves, revealing the scratch marks on his firm forearm. I feel like someone beat me up. My heart, along with the truth I was about to reveal, sank to the bottom. That wasn't love. Just desire when he wasn't sober. 17. Seeing that I didn't say anything, Ethan's eyes became colder. He pinched my chin. So whose bastard is it? Do you need me to help you seek legal aid? I was about to open my mouth. But the door was suddenly kicked open. An Omega in heat rushed in, disheveled. Save me, I feel terrible, please, save me. My brother chased after him, sweating profusely. He was even less dressed. Fortunately, Ethan had taken the suppressant beforehand and still had some self-control. But he needed another injection. He gasped for breath. This Omega is not right. Of course, he wasn't right. The Omega's pheromone compatibility with him was as high as 98%. The value was just a bit away from breaking the world record. In other words, fate led Ethan to my house, where he met his destined Omega partner. 18. Ethan's parents were overjoyed. They even sent me a bonus. Ethan's mom said earnestly. Thanks to you, always being by his side, he didn't make the same mistake as his dad. The mistake was, being dragged into heat by another Omega and even having an illegitimate child. That illegitimate child once caused chaos in the Chin family, which is why Ethan was so careful and remained chaste. He didn't want to make his father's mistake. He didn't, because I had an abortion, clearing the obstacles for him in advance. I couldn't even smile. The Omega was also happy. He could finally climb the social ladder and become a phoenix, instead of spending his life with an alpha from a beta family. My brother was furious. He went crazy, broke down, and threatened to cut his wrists. He hated us, hated this family. What if I were a rich alpha? Mingming would definitely stay with me. My parents, on the other hand, turned the blame on me. Always messing things up. We lost the girl and our reputation. I calmly blew my nose. From the outside, I was a completely unaffected outsider. Are you done? If you're done, I'm leaving. I see your wings have hardened, my dad cursed. I've known all these years that you're not honest. I didn't beat you enough when you were a kid. Since I started working for Ethan, these 5 years have been the most I've rebelled against them. Maybe it was because I heard Ethan say things like, I'll always be behind you. Too many times. But now he's being dragged back to discuss marriage, and it's likely that we'll never have anything to do with each other again in this lifetime. With my backer gone, I can only rely on myself. Yeah. I nodded. Well, it's useless now. You old geezer, you can't beat me anymore. And all those life lessons about betas were bullshit that only made my life harder. The only times I got any real satisfaction was when I rebelled. 19. My relationship with the Lin family had reached the point of no return. I canceled the lease on my apartment and planned to use the money Ethan gave me to relax and have a good time in another city. I heard that Omega had been forced into Ethan's company by the Chin family to be his chief assistant, but he caused a lot of trouble. Former colleagues called me, lamenting. Wah, Assistant Lin, if only you were still here. I lowered my head and gave my colleague a perfunctory smile. Chocolate flavored, right? The beautiful Omega woman brought me a piece of cake. Look at the presentation. Is it pretty? I examined it and gave an affirmative evaluation. Not bad. Your decorating skills have improved a lot. She blushed slightly. The Omega was my neighbor across the hall, a novice baker, and the first person to give me warmth in this strange city. I knew she had feelings for me. But I also knew that nothing would come of it. Even if the Omega accepted my honesty and was willing to face the truth about the embryo that once existed in my womb. I didn't want to hold her back. Do you want to smell my pheromones? The Omega handed me a sample vial of perfume. Although I didn't understand, I followed her wishes and smelled it. The sweet scent was cloying. I didn't dislike it. I thought the fragrance perfectly matched her identity as a baker. This is very expensive. It's custom made, and I saved up for a long time. How is it? Smells good, right? She looked at me expectantly. I nodded. Your pheromone scent is interesting. The Omega happily gave me the perfume sample. 20. I came out of her shop, carrying a bag of bread. So much that I could save money on food for the day after tomorrow. Ethan had been standing in front of my house for who knows how long. I saw him, without surprise. I didn't even bother to glance at him. Ethan sniffed the air. What's that smell? Omega? I gave him a longer look. Judging gender by scent? Betas find it amazing. Ethan quickly stopped the door from closing with his hand. He asked me. Aren't you going to invite me in? I've been waiting for you for a long time. I didn't stop him, but I didn't entertain him either. Ethan stared at the pheromone perfume on the coffee table. He must have recognized what it was. Aren't you going to explain? No explanation. When did your tastes change? Do you like Omegas now? His tone was accusatory. I still ignored him. Linjia, I'm begging you. The hand I was using to grind coffee froze. This was the second time I had heard Ethan say those words. 21. Ethan stood behind me, hugging me and burying his head in the crook of my neck. Talk to me, don't say anything. You know it wasn't my fault. I had no choice. Ethan's voice was trembling. I won't marry him. I only want you. Whether it's cutting off my gland or taking medicine to make me insensitive to pheromones, anything is possible. Can you come back to me? I chuckled and asked him. Why do you want me back? Because without me, no one will do your work. No. Ethan denied it emphatically, hugging me even tighter. Because I'm used to your presence, because I can't face losing you. Because I love you. He finally said the words I wanted to hear most. Although, it was too late. 22. Ethan, am I especially cheap? I pulled away from his embrace and turned to face him. Ethan was confused. Why do you say that? Every time. I paused. As long as you soften up and say nice things to me, I can forget everything and come back to you, continue to be your dog. Ethan only needed one sentence. It could make me forget those heartbreaking moments and go back to his side under the guise of responsibility and duty. And continue to dream of a romance with him. He asked me cautiously. So, is it the same this time? Seeing that I didn't speak, he wanted to kiss me. I turned my face away. Don't kiss me. Then I bit down on his nape, on the location of his gland, with such force that he felt like my enemy. Ethan pulled me into his arms to comfort me, lowering his head to make it easier for me to bite his gland. I love you. I love you. It was strange. He was clearly suffering, but he said such happy words. The taste of blood exploded on my tongue, mixed with the faint, cool scent rushing into my nose. Ethan's kisses were restrained. He was afraid of doing anything that would make me unhappy. When his hand covered my lower abdomen, he showed a look of pain. Then I understood. Ethan knew everything. 23. Ethan casually threw away the perfume sample. I angrily took it out of the trash can. This is someone's good intentions. He was inexplicably stubborn about this. That's not okay. It makes me uncomfortable. I'll pay her whatever she wants. Ethan. I warned him. Ethan took out the pheromone perfume that had been warmed by his body temperature. The bottle was more upscale than the one the Omega gave me. You're only allowed to use this. A cool scent. He didn't know how long he had ordered the pheromone perfume to let me smell his pheromones. 24. The only one who was unhappy about Assistant Lynn returning to the company was Ryan Zimmerman. He had already been demoted from chief assistant to a beautiful vase because of his many mistakes. Ethan's relationship with him hadn't progressed, and even the Cheen family couldn't urge them anymore. This made him feel very threatened. So, he carefully chose a night when I wasn't working overtime and tried to force himself on Ethan in the office. Ethan kicked the posturing Ryan into the restroom and then called me, feeling wronged. I still drove unhurriedly. By the time I got back, Ryan had somehow picked the lock. When he saw me, his expression was distorted. Our pheromone compatibility is 98%. We're a match made in heaven, and we'll be together sooner or later. I advise you, this beta, to give up. Ethan grabbed my clothes and pulled me towards him. He sat in the chair, burying his head in my chest, wanting to use my scent to soothe his restless desires. The result was that he became even more restless. Get him out of here, just looking at him is enough. Baby, I want you now. As Ethan spoke, he began to undo my buttons. Ryan was about to break down. Ethan, are you crazy? I'm your Omega. Wait. I leaned down and kissed Ethan's forehead. Let me show him how I help you sober up without a suppressant. It might hurt a little. It was too painful. I started instantly, grabbed Ethan's hair, and slammed his head against the table. He passed out. Ryan was stunned. He was still stubborn. You won't always be by Ethan's side. That's not very realistic. First of all, Ethan has separation anxiety. I adjusted my cuffs. Secondly, he'd rather risk his life running red lights and speeding hundreds of miles to find me than touch anyone else on the spot. Ryan was also in heat. He wasn't feeling well. No, impossible. So, I gave him a polite smile. It's your turn. 25. On the day of the wedding, the Lynns sent me messages playing the family card. I blacklisted them all. Most of the people who came to the wedding were colleagues from the company. Their attitude toward my marriage with Ethan was, we knew it. The president and his assistant's relationship wasn't pure. Ethan had been suppressing himself for 2 months, and the explosion happened that day. My nape was covered in bite marks, bleeding only once. At that time, he couldn't control himself and wanted to inject pheromones into my body. Smelling Ethan's scent, which made me feel at ease, I closed my eyes, exhausted. In the morning, I was woken up by Ethan's kisses. Good morning, darling. Do you need morning service? I had no right to refuse.